Halito Chumachukma. Hello everybody, this is Joel Wolf from the Choctaw Nation Historic Preservation Department out of Durant, Oklahoma. And today we are here to do a virtual tour. And today we're not going to do any kind of Facebook Live or anything due to some of the technical difficulties that we experienced the last time, and which will be fine. We'd like to see everybody's comments while we're doing this tour. But I think the signal here is kind of low, and some there's high, there's some low, so we don't want to get a little bit too far and then something happens, you know. So we decided, and I know some of the viewers gave me the comments about doing a video virtual tour, so we thought to do the video. So we're going to try this out, and I believe this will be great, and they get to see what we're doing. So today we are here in the old Doaksville. Doaksville is, of course, right behind me beyond these walls. So we're going to take a trip here and do a little tour amongst these walls and go down these trails, and we'll talk about the history here, and of course where this is probably once was a Choctaw Nation during the time, but we'll get to that later. And also we'll talk about Chief Colonel David Folsom, who brought some of his parties along the Trail of Tears, and who's also buried here. We'll get to that later. And so there's a lot of things to talk about here. We ain't going to do too much because it's kind of chilly here and there's a lot of shades in there, so it might be kind of cold. But again, also just letting you know, if you hear background noises, like we hear birds chirping a lot, we heard horses and mules was named earlier, and chicken crowing, and so we never know what we'll come to experience around. So but we'll get to this, and then of course this is one of the historical sites, and that we're going to learn today about Doaksville. And so let's get going. Let's go beyond these walls. These walls are, I always say, when you go across these walls, it's like going to a different time era. So I think this is pretty interesting, and I know y'all enjoy it. So let's get beyond these walls and let's talk about Doaksville, and then we'll go from there. All right, let's do that. All right, so let's go beyond these walls and let's talk about some history about Doaksville. So of course, if you come here to Doaksville, just word of advice, and there's already a sign here, I'll let y'all read it. Yes, please, no metal detecting or anything. I'm trying to preserve the area. So it's pretty much we're collaborating with Oklahoma Historical Society on this. So, but anyway, let's get going and talk about the history. Of course, you see here, you see a lot of the interpreter signs that's been placed here, and of course the Fort Towson have came down and redone some of these interpretive markers, and they did a good job, of course, with Oklahoma Historical Society as well. So this is partial about what talks about Doaksville, and you see here, this is possibly what Doaksville would have looked like. This is really the later part of Doaksville. The town you see here is of Doaksville back in possibly around the late 1890s. Of course, you got the cabin here, and of course you'll see the cabin within the Choctaw Nation around 1889. So just possibly was captured in that time. 1889 might be a little older, so and I can take you to possibly where this cabin site was sitting at. All right, let's go. Let's go on to our journey. Also, this talks about the Treaty of Doaksville of 1837. We're close here. Maybe you can read. If you can't, I'll try to read it for you guys. Prior to 1830, Mississippi was the Choctaw homeland. The Choctaw migration to the new western homeland began shortly after the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek was signed in 1830. The Choctaw people relocated to the Indian Territory, traveling overland and by river to places like Fort Towson, established as a U.S. garrison in 1824 to protect the western frontier of the United States. These immigrants sought to establish a successful and prosperous life to themselves and their children. This became a reality as Indian Territory's Choctaw Nation flourished during the period from the 1830s through the 1850s. Like the Choctaws, the Chickasaws' homeland prior to the 1830s was in Mississippi. Both tribes came under great pressure from the state of Mississippi and the U.S. government to relocate to the Indian Territory. In the Treaty of Pontotoc signed in 1832, the Chickasaws agreed to cede all of their land east of Mississippi River, but only after a suitable new homeland in the west had been selected. In January of 1837, at the invitation of the Choctaws, delegation of Choctaws and Chickasaws met at Doaksville. They discussed and finally agreed upon a plan for the Chickasaws to settle within the Choctaw Nation. Through the Treaty of Doaksville, the Chickasaws purchased an interest in the Choctaw Nation, and a new Chickasaw district was created. Chickasaw and Choctaw tribal members were allowed to reside in any portions of the Choctaw Nation. Chickasaw citizens began their move to Indian Territory in 1837, and most had arrived by 1840. The majority of the Chickasaws made the move via the river steamer to the Fort Coffee and on the Arkansas River to Fort Towson on the Red River. Growing pressure to the great and independent Chickasaw Nation led to the Choctaw-Chickasaw Treaty of 1855. This treaty was negotiated in Washington and led to the political separation of the tribes and the physical division of the Choctaw Nation. Rights to the far western portion of the Choctaw Nation were also given over the United States as a result of this treaty. And there you go. All right. And this is what the herring, or this is the Cleopatra, but the herring almost look like similar like this. So you want to think of something. Here's some of the roads, the maps. I don't know if you can see it. All right, let's get on to our journey. So Doaksville. I want to know the history of Doaksville. So Doaksville also is an archaeological site, and around the mid-1990s, the archaeological team came up here from OU to discover this place, to find more artifacts and a few other things all around this area. Well, discover more stuff here, and so the Oklahoma Historical Society decided to take over this place. And this place possibly was nothing but grass at one time, just grass. So here's some of the history of Doaksville. So Doaksville is an archaeological site, provides a glimpse of a diverse historic and cultural past of southeast Oklahoma. The trading post was established during the early 1820s by Josiah Doakes. With the signing of the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek and Doakeston, Doaksville became a major destination in what later became known as Indian Territory. With the military post nearby at Fort Towson for protection, Doaksville became the largest town in Indian Territory in 1850 and a commerce center of Choctaw Nation. Commerce grew with the establishment of the roads built by the supply of Fort Towson. These roads connected these regions to the metropolitan areas such as Fort Smith, Arkansas, Fort Jessup, Louisiana. Steamboats on the Red River in the late 1830s carried goods to Doaksville and agricultural products out of the region. At its height in the 1840s and 1850s, the town boasted more than 30 buildings, including stores, a jail, school, hotel, and 2 newspapers. Prosperity and location allowed Doaksville to become the political center and then intermittently capital of the Choctaw Nation after 1850. In 1837, the Choctaws and the Chickasaw signed the Treaty of Doaksville, what we just read earlier. A portion of the Choctaw Nation for settlement. In 1855, U.S. government, Choctaws and Chickasaws created in separate districts from the Chickasaw people. A constitution was drafted there in 1858. In 1859, the Choctaws moved their capital west to the Mayhew Mission and then to the present location of Tuskahoma. Doaksville decline began with abandonment of Fort Towson in 1854. The Civil War in the Indian Territory devastated the region plantation-based economy. On June 28, 1865, the last Confederate General, Stan Whitey surrendered the Indian Brigade to Union forces near Doaksville, which we'll get to that monument here in a little bit. The town declined in importance in the late 1800s. The final blow came in the 1870 when the railroad was built 1 mile south, which it will be back this way. Fort Towson, the new Fort Towson was built about 1.5 miles from here. The town declined in importance in the late 1800s of the final blow of the railroad. The town moved to the railroad and the Fort Towson took place of Doaksville. Doaksville is an Doaksville is an interpreted archaeological site operated by the Oklahoma Historical Society. So there you go, some little history. This town was founded by Josiah Doakes, and I'm trying to find Josiah Doakes where he's buried and everything. He's not buried here, you would think, but some say there's a Doakes family cemetery near Clarksville, Texas. And this is partial where the road would have went through in this area. So from my understanding, right in here, this area would have been the base of the road. Going through here, headed out south towards Clarksville, Paris, Texas, to wherever, especially around Red River, to catch the ferry or the boat. And another road that leads to the Fort Towson, as we'll show you that later. So this was a majority of the town of Doaksville, and you imagine a lot of Choctaws and other pioneers and few people that lives around here. And this would have been one of the oldest town if this was still surviving today in Oklahoma. So right now we're going to go towards where Colonel Folsom's home was once stood. So here's another interpreter about the Doaksville Hotel. And this is Colonel David Folsom, was this was his home, but he turned it into his hotel. Of course, during the 1840s, David operated a public house or a hotel in Doaksville. Now, of course, we just talked about earlier about he was signed the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek. And in 1847, he passed on, and a battle, I think, with pneumonia and sickness, and he's buried in Doaksville Cemetery. I think he was 57 or 58 years old in that time. Still a young man, you know, and of course he came along with all the Choctaws, and he was part of them that didn't want to sign the treaty. But and of course he didn't really too have fun either with Greenwood LaFleur, even though they was together being around, but he just didn't have any fun about being they like the other chiefs as well had any fun about Greenwood LaFleur. But this is his home, possibly his home, where of course you see the slab here where possibly his steps were entering to his home. And of course you see the chimney area. The chimney over here has fallen. And so it happens when he passed on, his daughter possibly took over his home site and still run it as a hotel. And they turned it into, they call it the Bird's Hotel. Colonel Folsom's daughter married a Chickasaw. His last name was a Bird, so, and I believe this is why, you know, turned to the Bird Hotel, and here in Doaksville. And of course, his daughter is buried in Ada. So there's your little fun fact about Colonel Folsom. He had quite a bit of children. He had a son. He's buried up in near Caddo. His son married, I believe, his third or fourth cousin, which is Pitchlin. His daughter-in-law was a Pitchlin, which would have been his, I believe, his niece, or no, third cousin too, someone in there. So there's your little fun fact too. So Judge Folsom, that's what they call him. Melvina Folsom Pitchlin, or Melvina Pitchlin Folsom. There you go. And his son. So let's go ahead and go on. Here's some of the wells you see here. And no, I'm not going to look down to it because I don't want this camera to fall in. So we'll get close much to it, but that's as far as I'm going to go. So yeah, these wells have been reconstructed, you know, by the Oklahoma Historical Society, and the Oklahoma OU archaeologists come down here and reconstruct this little areas like this kitchen right over here. Seems like I can smell chicken and shuka-nipi, which is hog meat. All that cooking here. So they said possibly this would have been the kitchen area. So man, I guess that's where, like, I guess this will be their cafeteria or their restaurant. So they come over here to eat. This is their restaurant. So Stan Whitey, he was a Cherokee fought in the Confederate, was the only Confederate of the Indian Brigade still roaming around till around 1865, as the stories I've told you earlier, that he surrendered. So he went to Robert M. Jones's home just southeast of today, present day of Hugo. So he came up to Robert M. Jones, which Robert M. Jones also was a pretty wealthy man, and he Robert M. Jones, I guess he more of a Robert M. Jones possibly helped the Confederates. You know, he put his money in, and they call him Colonel Robert M. Jones. He didn't have anything to do with Civil War or anything with the Confederates, but he put his money in to help them and so forth. So Colonel Robert M. Jones. So, or I can't remember. I think it might be Colonel. Y'all correct me if that's what it was. But I remember Nick and Kenny and John Davis was telling me about it. So, but Robert M. Jones was a wealthy man. He owns a lot of plantation. He held a whole bunch of stores from the Red River area, all from here to, at the time, Shawneetown, all the way down to Shreveport to New Orleans. I mean, he had everything. And he was half Choctaw. But Stan Whitey came to his home and said he wants to surrender. He said that this is not my place for you to lay your arms down. So let's head on to Doaksville. I'm just paraphrasing pretty much that's what they would say. So he rode along with Robert M. Jones up to here in Doaksville. So here's possibly where Stan Whitey surrendered, right in this area in 1865. The last Confederate general to surrender. And here, right next to it, is the Doaksville, noted town in Indian Territory. This site is at the north end of Main Street, called Commercial Road. And this town began in 1831. Name of nearby post office, Fort Towson, was changed to Doaksville November 11th, 1847, under Josiah Doakes. So, north end would have been just a little bit up north up here. Of course, there's a well, another well. This would have been the center of the town right here. So, I want to do a little panorama area, show you what this town would have looked like. I mean, we get kind of a view. And right up here, this would have been the main street going through here. And there are some buildings standing in this area. If you've seen the picture of the buildings, especially the ones that were shown in the beginning, that's possibly where they stand at, right in this area. And through erosion and weather, ground kind of depressed down a little bit. So let's walk over here right quick. So right in this area would have been the trail that leads to Fort Towson. This was the military road that was leading to Fort Towson. They call it the Fort Towson, Fort Smith Military Road. So beyond here, it went through this way. So basically what I've heard is a little bit south from this jail beyond here, and that's where the actual trail went through. So they came through here and went beyond. And just imagine over 100 years, wagons, horses, people possibly living in that's buried in that cemetery of Old Doaksville, walked upon these grounds, carrying their goods, walking their children. Some were sick, going to the doctor's office, having their little dance deals in their little areas. I don't know. I never heard anything about, was this like a gun slinging town, like, you know, the Wild West, like, you know, someone brings, you know, have a duel out here. I don't know. They may have. Or did they, you know, shoot people here, pow, pow, you know. I don't know. That's, you know, I never heard anything.
but Doaksville was supposed to be just a town of community, and so, but this is interesting. So we are here at the old jail. This would possibly be one of our last stops here before we enter out. Of course, this has been kind of reconstructed again by the archaeologists of OU. This is what they have done. Reconstruction. Also, if I'm going too fast on these interpreters, maybe what you can do is pause the video and you can possibly read. So, like I said, I'm trying to do quick as I can because I got long ways back to Durant. So, and the sun's kind of going down. It's getting a little cooler out here. So, anyway, so we're here in this old jail cell. This is what they believe the jail was at, and then when they found it. So we're actually inside of it, and small jail. I mean, just a small jail. Hey everyone, earlier I said that we'll get to see David Folsom's gravesite, and I think I ended the tour too soon. So before we leave out of here, I'll show you his gravesite and some other areas. This is the old Doaksville cemetery. You see here, there's many other graves. There's the Fort Towson Cemetery across the way, but this, where I'm standing at, it would be the old Doaksville Cemetery, where all the prominent Choctaws and settlers that lived amongst in Doaksville are buried here. And along with Colonel David Folsom, who was chief in Mississippi. So it says here, to the memory of Colonel David Folsom, the first Republican and chief of the Choctaw Nation, the promoter industrial education, religion, and morality, was born January, say here, looks like January 2nd, 1791, and departed this life September 24th, 1847. Age 56 years, 8 months. It says here, he being dead yet speaketh. So when that says he being dead yet speaketh, that means his history is still alive, still speaketh today. The history still moves on. So he can tell us all about what went through from Mississippi, coming through here and settled here in the new lands, in the new Indian territory with his people. So, and right over here is his, I believe, his brother-in-law, he married his sister. His name is Colonel Joe H. Nail. Of the Choctaw Nation. He was also a military. He came along with the Choctaws through here, and again, a brother-in-law of David Folsom. And this grave here is, I believe, is Colonel David Folsom's niece. His niece or his daughter. I would say it was his daughter, but could be his niece. Trifina Wall Stewart, I heard a story, two different stories, but the first one I've heard is that she's tried to save a little boy or a little girl. I can't remember how, but saying that in the water, and she tipped over the boat and she couldn't swim and she drowned it. So they both perished, and of course they said the little one was buried next to her. So I believe that's possibly what this gravesite is. So this is the old Doaksville Cemetery, and it dates way back, I don't know when. So, and of course we have people over there. So I heard sound, so they're over there, look like walking their dog or something. So anyway, this is your history of Doaksville. I hope you enjoy again. So this is the last tour of Doaksville. We may come back out here sometime soon again. Like I said, our fellow guys that does a lot of history around this area, we may have them bring them back and they can fill in the gaps and stuff. Maybe something I missed or misinterpreted or something. But it's always good to have corrections. It's always good to fill in that gap that, you know, we missed or something, so we can get everything straightened out. So, but I've learned a lot from these guys. So hopefully you learned a lot about Doaksville. And again, like I said, we'll be back here soon, and we'll go from there. So I'm fixing to head back to Durant, and so y'all have a great day. Like I say, and we'll see you soon, or see you on the next.